So for today's agenda, we're just going to very quickly split them into three sections. So the first section, it's more of a fundamental 101, but it's also very, very useful information for people who are already on social media. The next section will be looking deep dives into different social media channels and just more tips on how to grow your followers there, how to effectively manage those specific channels. And then the third part is more of how you can manage it with your team, whether it's your staff or your volunteers, just different ways that you can measure social media and the tools that you can use. So before we get started, I know when everyone registered, I asked how many channels you use. And I'm glad to see that people are already familiar with social media, but here let's see what kind of channels you're actually on. So I'm just going to launch a quick survey, and it should appear on your screen, and you can select more than one, so please feel free to select the ones that you are on or would like to be on. Just give it a few seconds. Right now we have about 40% of people voting in, 62%, and then once it hits about 80%, I'll close the poll and let everyone see the results. So you can see what your peers are on, so you can kind of gauge what is possible. So 90% of you voted, so I'm just going to close this and share it. So as you can see, a lot of you guys are on the big social media channels. You guys are, 100% of you are on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. That's actually a great tool. And I'm really glad to see that people are on Instagram, and another 23% is on other channels. As you can tell, there are a lot of different channels out there. I can't cover them all in this poll, but I'm glad to see that you're kind of used to the idea and kind of diving in and out. So I'm just going to go back to the presentation. So the first part is understanding social media. So a lot of people, they come in different angles when it comes to social media. A lot of people come from the understanding that if they have a website, then why is social media important? So these numbers are actually great even for people who are currently on social media, so it can just further help your case. So donors, actually 75% of donors use online resources to look for information before they give a donation. And this is again based off of the Google Think Insights. If you want more information, you can Google that and find the report there. And of the 75%, what kind of resources do people use? So the top one is, of course, a search engine, but second and third is a nonprofit website, and then the social networking site. So that is a huge percentage of people going to social media networks, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter, just to learn about that nonprofit or charity that they want to support. So when you don't have a social media presence, you are kind of losing a bit of your audience when they want to discover and learn more about you. Now the other question is, if you are already using social media, why do you need to understand it? So here is where we'll look at it not in terms of whether you should have a social media channel, but why are you on that channel? One of the guidelines that we like to ask our nonprofit peers is, if you are on social media, is it a product of peer pressure, or is it because you have it part of your strategy, not just social media strategy, but overall organization strategy? Some of the questions you can ask yourself is, what are you achieving on that social media channel? So think of Facebook and Twitter. So what are you achieving on Twitter that you can't achieve elsewhere? And not saying that you have to have unique needs, but if you can't really answer that in a very direct way, then those are some of the hints that you can see whether it's feasible that you might be just on social media because you can. Another one is, does it align or extend your mission? And why did you choose X channel over Y channel? So for example, a lot of you guys are on Facebook. Why did you choose Facebook over, let's say, Instagram? So a lot of people have good knowledge of social media channels, but that's just take it a step back for our peers who might not be up to speed on that. So very quickly, what is social media? It's actually more of a conversation. Think of it as a conversation that you have online. So social media is not a broadcast tool. It's not something that you use to just only share announcements. It's a way for you to interact and build relationships online. And I know when people, especially when you think of charities and social media, people think of viral marketing campaigns, either for awareness, but a lot of them is viral fundraising campaigns. The most recent example is the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, where it did, raise crazy amounts of money for ALS Canada, but and again, in our experience, this is very rare. A lot of people, and especially like marketing experts, when they look at that case, they equate it to winning the social media lottery. So when people think of social media as like a viral fundraising tool, that's actually the wrong thinking. Social media, when you're doing it well, is usually best for raising awareness, for educating your clients or other people about your cause, and for engaging your supporters. So again, going back to the fact that social media is more of a relationship management tool, channels that you can use to engage people, which is why they fit nicely with these three things. Not saying that you can't raise money from it, and not saying that you can't win the social media lottery, but when your social media strategy is contingent on that, unfortunately you will be met with some disappointment because that is very rare. So going back to now that you know what social media is, what channel should you use? So here I just kind of grouped very quickly some of the social media channels out there and where, in terms of the three buckets, where they fall nicely into. So each social media channel has advantages and disadvantages. The most important thing is to choose the one that is relevant for you, for your goal and your organization, and understand that each channel that you add onto your plate is more work. And a lot of times I know people don't think of social media as costing up front because it's free, unless you want to invest a little bit more for ads, etc. But on just like a user basis, it is free. But then it's your time that you pay to invest into it. So our rule of thumb is each channel that you pick, you can budget 2 hours per week, 2 hours a week per channel. So if you have 2 channels, that would be 4 hours a week that you would spend on social media. And it's not just posting, but it's researching and engaging with people. So that's all into that budget. So very quickly, some deep dives. If you are on social media, but you have heard of other channels and you're not sure whether you should invest time into it because it is an increased responsibility, we're just going to take a look at some of the big players out there. And this is actually a good start when you're looking into social media, because a lot of people, they evaluate social media on certain metrics that might not make sense for a charity or a nonprofit. A lot of people look at social media networks based on users, but actually the better statistics that you should use is unique monthly visitors. The rationale behind that is, like for example, Facebook, they have over 1 billion users, but like about 20% of that, they're fake accounts. And that makes sense because people create an account for their baby or for their dog. So and some people create multiple Facebook accounts and forget passwords and then create another one. So when you look at why you should be on that channel, if it's for engagement, if it's for awareness, you want to know how many people can you possibly reach, your potential reach. So Facebook is one of the top players out there. They have over 900 million unique monthly visitors. So this is your potential audience. The largest demographic is women. And again, these are very, very general stats. And when I say largest demographic, it's like 51% or more. So in these cases, it is women, but men are like another 49%. So just take it with a grain of salt. But it is interesting that Canadians are actually the most active Facebook users. So if that's something that that speaks well to you, you don't really care whether you reach an international audience, you really just want to engage Canadians, that's actually a really good channel that kind of fits in with that. And again, it's good for sharing content, it's good for engaging people. For Twitter, again, very high unique monthly visitors. It's not as high as Facebook, but that's still a really great audience. And it's tend to be, in our experience, better for outreach and raising awareness of your cause and sharing content because it tends to be easier to share multiple posts within a day, and people won't be offended on the fact that you're very, very active. Some of the runner-ups is LinkedIn. Again, this is a very interesting stat that actually the largest demographic on LinkedIn is men. So if that's something that you want to invest time into reaching, just also consider some of those social media channels and whether you want to, the audience that you want is on that channel. In our experience, again, it's good for sharing content, and again, it's good for sharing job postings because that's sort of the basis of that platform. Now YouTube, you'll see that the unique monthly visitors is over 1 billion, and you might be wondering why isn't this first then? YouTube is more of a video sharing. It is still a social network because you can connect with people, people can subscribe to your channel, but in terms of the monthly visitors, a lot of them are there to view video content, so it's not like they're there to, look up the latest news, things like that. So I put that in the second, like in the slide of runner-ups, because it's not something that you can make it pass all the content very easily. Again, it's good for education and raising awareness. And actually the third social media channel that's really big is Pinterest, which is interesting because when I was just kind of doing my own research, some of the community living associations, I checked out all of your websites just to see what social media channels you're on and which ones you've linked on your website. And I might be wrong, you might have a Pinterest account, but I've noticed that no one has a Pinterest account at least linked to their website. So it's actually very interesting that it's not among the consideration, but it has a lot of unique monthly visitors. So other active social media channels is Reddit. If you don't recognize the little alien, it's actually almost like a hidden secret because it's very, very popular online, but not a lot of nonprofits are on it. But it has a huge audience. It's actually larger than Instagram, Tumblr, and Google+. So just going down from the left to the right, there's Reddit, there's Google+, there's Tumblr, Instagram, and SlideShare, which is another social media network, a great tool for sharing content and educating about your cause. So this is very briefly some of the social media channels that are out there. There are obviously more, but these are among the top for potential reach. So before you get invested into each social media channel, we do want to cover some of the privacy and security concerns. Not that there is anything that you need to be worried about, but because you are on there, you're representing your brand, it's good to know what you're getting into. So the first tip we want to give is know what you're agreeing to. So social media platforms, even if we pay for accounts, we are consumers of that product. So there are times where they might change certain things, like recently Facebook changed their news feed algorithm. A lot of nonprofits were disappointed because they don't reach as many people, but unfortunately because it is your product, we just have to learn how to work within that system. There's nothing wrong with that. You're still engaging people and still reaching your audience, but just know that because they can change their policies and how their system works, just know what you're agreeing to. Another crucial factor is, at least for Canada, the Canadian anti-spam legislation. A lot of people think of this as email communications, but it's any electronic messaging. So it does actually apply to social media. The channels on how it applies to social media is a little bit gray. As this law becomes a little bit more mature, we have been advised by our lawyers that it will become more black and white. Right now, the rule of thumb is you can only really contact your social media followers within that platform. If you want to take them out of the platform, you need express consent. So for example, Eventbrite will be considered a social media channel. And Eventbrite, when people sign up for your events, you can export their information. You can export their name, any registration field that they fill in, including email address. So if you're tempted to export your Eventbrite list and just dump it into your newsletter, really remember CASL. In that sense, you're actually not allowed to do that unless on the Eventbrite form you ask them, would you like us to follow up with you? And then you can add them to another communication that is very, very directly stated on that form. If you want to contact them, you have to give them a way to unsubscribe and let them know why they're receiving that message. We do have a really detailed blog on how CASL applies, not just to emails and social media, but your organization in general. But I really want to hone in on that point because the fines are very high, and when nonprofits and charities look at CASEL, they're like, oh, you know, it's targeting large corporations. But again, it's the letter of the law. Unfortunately, they don't distinguish whether you're a charity, you know, fundraising for your dollars, or you're a large multinational corporation. If you are found in violation of CASEL, corporations are fined up to $10 million per violation. And if you don't have the right CASEL policies in place to ensure that you're compliant, directors are actually can be found individually liable up to $1 million. So those are huge fines. Not saying that if you are caught in violation, that'll definitely happen, but if you are not careful, it is a possibility. Now the last 2 points is social media data is stored on the cloud, because that's just the nature of the networks. Not saying that the cloud privacy is poor, but there is a sense that it's not stored in Canada. So here I don't want to scare people because it is very, very secure, but I do want to stress that there is a difference between cloud privacy and cloud security. And a lot of charities, they hear this thing where like especially if they accepted a grant from the government, that data can only be stored in Canada. While that is true, nonprofits and charities are actually legally allowed to store their data in the cloud. It is considered more of a transaction, like a processing of information. But what you are responsible for is to ensure that you have the top-of-the-line encryption. When data is stored on the cloud, and any kind of emails, even if it's an email server hosted in Canada, it passes through different networks, and you can't unfortunately control where it passes through. So 90% of like the Canadian traffic is actually routed through the U.S., and that's just how the internet works. That's how email can travel so fast and get in your inbox within seconds. So the government is not concerned so much on whether your data is physically stored on a server or not, is that you have to protect it. So encryption is actually more important about versus where your data is physically stored. And then one last thing, going back to social media, is treat it, even if you have state-of-the-art encryption and you set your settings so only your followers can see your messages, treat it as if it's not very private. Think of it as you're on the subway and you're having a conversation with a friend, and even if you're whispering, there is a possibility that someone will overhear it. So for example, if you send out a post or a tweet, and then later on you realize, oh, I have the wrong date, or maybe this is not on brand, so you delete it. So even though it's deleted from your organization's records, somewhere on the internet there is a version of that message. Again, not to scare you, because once it's out there, it'll take a bit of time for it to just kind of get lost into all the internet data. But for example, Google, a lot of times when people go on their search engine, when you search for a website, there is a little link that says see cached version. Cached version is just basically an archived version of that website. So again, if it's a Twitter cache of your feed, it could technically contain a message that you deleted in the even right after sending it. So basically the rule of thumb is anything that you want to share on social media, just double check that it is on brand, that it's something that you are proud to share, and that it won't get your organization into trouble. And then in part 3, we'll go over some of the ways that you can ensure that this is all done and won't stress you out. Moving on to part 2. So I've done a lot of talking, so I'm going to do another poll. A lot of you guys are on social media, so I just wanted to ask, how active are you on your social media channels? So here I'm just going to launch this, and now this time around you can only choose one answer, so it doesn't have to be very accurate, but again, this is more so you can understand how your peers are, and also for us to understand how much detail do we need to get into for the second section. If you're very active, then I will give you just more pointers on how to grow your followers. If you're not very active, then we can go into how you can schedule that and some of the guidelines on posting. Okay, so 88% of you voted. I'm just going to close the survey and share the results. And I'm very happy to say the majority of you are very active. 44% of you share at least daily, and then the other 33% at least weekly. So I'm glad to hear that you are on social media channels and you're not just leaving it there to collect internet dust. So I'm just going to hide the results and go back to the presentation. In the beginning, I talked about certain channels, and I've highlighted the big ones. So I'm just going to go into more details on how you can succeed on these channels. I'm not saying that you can't find this information for other channels that we don't cover. So if you have any questions about channels that maybe wasn't covered in today's presentation, feel free to ask Yumi in the question box. So the first big one is Facebook, and all the examples that I'm showing here is actually your own peers. So I want to give you a big digital applaud to Saskatchewan Association for Community Living. So for Facebook, some of like just the basic things that, so the way that the slide works is number 1, 2, 3 are ways that you can optimize your account. I'm not saying that this is exactly what you need in order to have a viral campaign, but when you optimize your account, it would be easier for people to find you, to recognize you, and also helps you make the most of your virtual real estate space. So the first one is have an engaging cover photo. So for this one, I love it. It's a tagline. It summarizes exactly what they do. Have a recognizable profile picture, which is their logo. So when I'm searching for community living, I can find it on Facebook. When I see that logo, I immediately associate it with the organization. I know what they do. Number 3 is to have a really short bio. When you go on and on, people tend to not read it. But having something short and concise really resonates with people. And again, link back to your website. As much as social media is great, you do want people to go back to your website and have that relationship there. Always move them up the communication channels. So if you have all those done and you optimize your Facebook account, so what are the things that you can do? So again, these are rule of thumbs. You can you can have experiments on your Facebook page and decide what's best for your organization. But generally, ideal posts are actually between 40 to 80 characters. So short posts, don't use the entire box to just post a status. Facebook does have a native scheduling tool, so you can actually schedule a post in advance, even on weekends, so you don't have to be right at your computer typing that as is. Some of the things, although now this is up for debate, but usually you want to prioritize photos over links and make sure to use optimal sizes. So here you can see that Saskatchewan Association for Community Living, they shared a link and they have a really short post just describing what is happening. Because you have to think about Facebook as a personal tool. A lot of people who are on Facebook, they're looking at their friends and their families updates. So then when you are updating things like donate to my organization now, we have this really timely gala, please help us, it doesn't really sit well with people when they're at home and they just want to catch up with their friends. When you're sharing photos about your organization or behind the scenes photos of your office, it's really personal and it makes them feel more attached to your brand. So that's something to keep in mind. And the last things is if you are, so let's say you're reaching out to your supporters and your donors, so individuals tend to be more active on weekends between 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. They're also active during the weekday, but very late at night, so like 8 to 12 a.m. So 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. So if you want to try using the native scheduling tool to hit that audience, you totally can. If you're reaching out to other organizations, weekdays between 1 and 4 is the optimal time to reach them. And again, on Twitter, there is a native analyzation tool, so you can see whether your fans are on during those recommended times. If they're not, don't worry, just focus on the times that your fans are on. So for Twitter, again, have an engaging and visually beautiful cover photo with optimal sizes. So here it's amazing because they actually are advertising for a conference that's coming up, so that is a great use of that space. Again, have a recognizable profile picture that's branded and a short and sweet bio that's linked back to your website. So if you want to succeed on Twitter, ideal tweets are about 100 characters or under, mainly so when people share it, they can put in their own little personal touch or their own retweets, and have a maximum of 2 hashtags. Always try to have a hashtag so it can be discovered in the whole Twitter universe, but when you have too many, it comes across a little bit spammy. And then the rule on Twitter is to share 80% of content that is not yours, and then 20% of content that is yours. Think of it as, again, Facebook is a very personal tool. Twitter is as well. Even if organizations or individuals want to know what your organization is doing, if all of it is focused on you, it tends to get tiring. So sharing content from other people will help you establish a good brand image and help people, again, engage with you and to have a conversation with you. So here, individuals are actually more active midweek and weekends between noon and 6 p.m. And then organizations is usually during the work week and work hours. So for LinkedIn, it's a little bit different because it's more of a discussion, sharing broad topics, and obviously job postings. So it's a little bit different. You do still want to have a recognizable profile picture, have an engaging cover photo, but the next point is to have all of your employees, board members, and volunteers reference you on LinkedIn, because this actually increases your reach. Majority of people discover LinkedIn groups because they know someone who is part of that organization. So make sure you do that. And then other tips is, I know it sounds kind of weird because you don't want to keep posting job postings on your LinkedIn page, but that actually increases your search engine optimization. When people search for Community Living Ontario on Google, their LinkedIn page will come up because they share a lot of events and possibly job postings. So then again, rule of thumb is Tuesdays and to Thursdays between 7 and 9 a.m. and then a little bit closer to the end of the work hour is when people are actively on LinkedIn. So YouTube is another great channel. Even if you don't have time for it, really think about it and maybe put into the works, because it's actually a great education tool, a great intro tool. So again, have a banner that's engaging, that like kind of encapsulate how your organization wants to come across. Have a recognizable profile picture, preferably a logo or something that, again, is in tune with your brand persona. And then some of the ways that you can really optimize your YouTube channel is to, one, have compelling titles. Don't just put a title like Event 1, with a date. Arrange keywords first and then your branding elements last. This will help people kind of navigate your title, your videos much faster and understand which videos they want to watch. Another tip is, right on the homepage of your YouTube channel, you can actually select a trailer. Select one that is very emotional and short. Usually people don't want to watch a video that's 20 minutes long on the YouTube channel, but having something that kind of incorporates all your branding and gives them a reason why they want to stay on your channel is definitely a plus. Another tip is to have playlists. So when you have a YouTube account, you can actually upload a lot of videos, but they would just stay on your second tab. If you want to really take them and highlight them and feature them, you can create playlists and put those playlists as sections on your homepage. So do that so then people can actually theme your videos and understand which ones they want to watch. Now the last tip is Google for Nonprofits. A lot of charities qualify for that, mainly because Google wants to support as many charities and nonprofits as possible. So if you are eligible, it's free. You won't lose anything by applying, and we highly recommend that, because within the Google for Nonprofits package, charities and nonprofits can get YouTube for Nonprofits. And this is a program that doesn't get as much attention as it should, but it's amazing because, one, not only does it give you a great resources online, but on your videos you can actually enable external links and call to actions. So what is external annotation links? So when you view a video, sometimes on YouTube there'll be a little text box that pops up saying subscribe. So subscribe is something that will link internally into the YouTube channel, but you might not want to do that. You might want to say, please help us with this latest campaign, please donate on our website. If you aren't a premium account user on YouTube, you can't link to external websites, but if you sign up for Google for Nonprofits, you get that feature for free. So on your videos you can say donate to our cause and have a link that links directly to your donation page. Another great thing is a call to action buttons, which looks a little bit different from annotation links, but the same thing. With YouTube for Nonprofits, you can actually get that to link to a donation page instead of link back into the YouTube platform. So those are some tips for YouTube. So the last channel that we're going to really focus on is Instagram. So a few of you are on it, so you guys are already there, but for those who aren't on it, you might want to consider sharing some of your photos and other things on Instagram. So again, from the top three perspective in terms of optimizing your account, have a compelling cover photo, have recognizable profile pictures, and again, always have a brief bio that links back to your website. So how could you engage people on Instagram? Going back to my initial question of how active are you on your social media channels, if you're not very active, that's okay. You can always come back and become active again. But the rule of thumb is when you're on social media, people tend to notice when you're inactive. So if you create an account years ago and you haven't posted since, people will know that you're not on that channel. That is not the way to reach you, and then just not discover you anymore. So Instagram is one of those channels where it's very crucial that you stay active. There's a lot of people on that space sharing personal photos that unfortunately you are in a competition with. So the rule of thumb is to share one image daily. So not just any image, again, hopefully they have a strategy around it, but if you are active, you will gradually and steadily gain followers that way. So I didn't actually put this on here, but another tip is to theme your Instagram. When you have photos that are just kind of in a collection, if it doesn't seem like you have a running theme, and it doesn't have to be the same thing, but it might be, you want to share inspirational stories, or you want to share quotes, or you want to share behind the scenes about your office workings, that's fine. But when you take that into consideration, your daily photos will eventually tell a big story. When people can't really read that on your Instagram account, because like as you can see here, Community Living Ontario, you can kind of get a sense of all the photos that they're sharing. If people can't tell what story you're telling, then it's not a very engaging account, and then they won't want to follow you. So the tip is to, again, it doesn't have to be anything formal or comprehensive, but have a theme and stick with it. Be consistent. Share a photo within that theme daily. Another tip is you can use Instagram to report live from events and conferences, which is obvious on the Community Living Ontario channel. And this is a great way to engage people at the moment. Again, add hashtags to captions so you can bring forth that photo and make it discoverable by other people outside of your immediate network. So those are some of the channels, but again, I haven't covered all the channels out there. That can take a whole webinar in itself. So if you're interested in another channel that I didn't cover, like Reddit or Snapchat, what are some tips you can follow in order to grow your follower base and engagement? So the first rule of thumb is content marketing. It's not all about your organization, even if you are doing great things and you want to share things. Think of it as when you're an individual following a nonprofit or a brand or like a corporation, when they're constantly sharing things like join us at our next event, we have a webinar coming up, please donate. It's a lot of taking. So if you are able to just even share like a nice quote or elevate someone else's content above your own, that is more engaging than this constant broadcast. So again, the tip is to share other people's content and participate in discussions. It's okay for your brand to appear vulnerable or be, very down to earth. Just connect with your followers and they will resonate more with you. So you will resonate more with them. Another tip is be timely with your responses and be approachable. Kind of tying back to what I said about when you're on a social media platform and you're not active for a very long time, people tend to notice. The same thing is if you're on social media and you're very active, but you don't respond to comments, months on end. And not saying that we are perfect in this as well. This is something that everyone can work on. But try and strive to aim to be timely with your responses. So this does mean that you might need to have your social media accounts visible somewhere so you can keep tabs on it. And again, this sounds scary. Wait till section 3 where this will make more sense on how you can manage it in your day. And the third tip is focus on stories that will engage your supporters. So when you are, trying to share a donation campaign that needs support, instead of saying donate now, you can share a story of how you changed someone's life and say, if you want us to continue this great work, please help us because we can't do it alone. That is more engaging than you saying we need 10 grand by the end of this month. Treat your supporters as if they are your friends and family. What would they like to hear? And then the ultimate tip is if you lack time, don't worry about it. There are a lot of channels out there, but that doesn't mean you need to be on them. Our ultimate tip is focus on one channel and just concentrate on delivering consistent content on that channel. Try to be the go-to resource so then people don't think that your efforts are diluted from your website to Facebook and Twitter. It's okay if you're just on Facebook or just on Twitter. If you're really engaging there, that speaks volumes. So that is the, and this takes me to a case study because there's all these tips and all these channels. What can you really do with them? So I found this great campaign. It's actually a charity in the UK called Scope, and their whole premise is they want to help educate people about disabilities and really break that barrier of awkwardness. So what they did was host an Ask Me Anything on Reddit, which is one of the more lesser-known channels. Reddit is actually really great for education and discussion purposes, so in this sense they picked a right channel to have this kind of campaign. And what they did is they actually approached one of a really famous disabled person, Alex Broker, to host this Ask Me Anything. And as you can see, this reached a lot of people. So on the screen caption, you can see there's over 7.5 million subscribers to this particular forum. And then on on the right-hand side, there's 137 points, which is like their voting system. 76% of them voted very positively, and that actually helps bring up this forum for other people to discover on Reddit. So this is a great campaign that was hosted by Scope to try to break that barrier, saying that it's okay if you feel awkward about it. I don't want you to hide your feelings about disabilities. Just ask us anything. And that's literally what happened. If you look at that thread, there are some really deep questions, but there's also a lot of silly questions. But this actually spoke really well for their brand because one, not only did they present themselves as a very down-to-earth, very approachable charity, but they came across as very genuine, to not be afraid of PR issues or anything like that. They're just there to help out. So in this sense, they really met their goal of educating and promoting a discussion on this topic. So the third part is how do you create sustainable social media plans? And then I'll quickly bring up the last poll. And this one will hopefully speak to, will help you understand this section, how we want to think about this. Because a lot of times, it might be just you or it might be several people, and the way that you're working works. But if you think about breaking down the elements of your social media efforts, if you don't have certain policies in place, it can actually make it harder to work, not only just with yourself, but with staff and volunteers. So I'm just going to give it a few more moments. Of 75% of you voted. It's going to wait till it hits the 80 mark. Just a few more seconds. 85% of you voted. Okay, 88%. Perfect. I'm just going to close and share the results. And hopefully you will see how you stack up to your peers as well. And you should be seeing the results now. If you're not able to see it, so 44% of you said it's just you. So it's just you managing your social media accounts. Another half of you said about 2 to 3 people manage it with you. And then 8% have over four people managing it. So these are actually really great revealing numbers. So there are a lot of tips that we have in this in the next section that will apply to all of you, whether you're managing it by yourself or managing it with other people. So I'm just going to hide the results and go into some of the tips. So just going all the way back, you chose your channels, you understand the tools. How do you create a plan that is sustainable, not just for you, because hopefully you're going to take vacation, and during your vacation you're going to pass on your duties to someone else. The first principle is you need to start with a social media strategy. Again, it doesn't have to be very comprehensive or formally documented, but some of the things that you want to cover in the social media strategy is, what is your goal on social media? Are you trying to do something like Scope? Are you just trying to raise awareness or have a discussion? Or are you trying to create a viral campaign and earn lots and lots of money? You need to have that documented somewhere so that you understand what goals you're trying to work towards. The next one is, how does that goal tie into your mission? It's great because a lot of people say, my goal is to have a lot of followers. But how does that tie into your mission? You can have a lot of followers on Facebook and Twitter, but if you're not meeting your fundraising targets, then maybe your goal isn't to get a lot of followers. Maybe your goal is you want to engage those followers to actually help you with your operations and with your projects. So also think about how that ties into your overall mission. The next question is, what channels are you using and who is responsible for managing them? So if these are things that you haven't thought about, there's a great resource online that is completely free. So the URL is there, and don't worry, the slides will be made available afterwards, so you don't have to copy everything right now. And then because we want to be as transparent as possible. So this screen caption is actually our social media strategy. So as you can see, it's not really comprehensive, but it kind of covers some of the things that we want to accomplish on social media, that we just want to be there to educate people. We're not there to necessarily talk about our technology donations program, although that is a factor. But those are some of the guiding principles for that. The next part is to have a social media policy, and this is different from your strategy because this is more in line of how do you practically put your efforts into play. So things like, what is your brand persona? How is your organization being portrayed online? Do you have a sense of humor? Are you witty? Are you serious? Are you very emotional and engaging? These are things that you need to work around, especially if you're working with multiple people. You want your organization to sound consistent, but have each individual also add to that voice. And then the biggest part of the social media policy is, how do you respond to people? Don't just think about positive mentions, you have to also think about negative mentions. So here is our social media policy. So our chart actually scrolls down more, but we go into things like how do we respond when someone says TechSoup sucks? Or how do we respond when someone says, like, TechSoup is great, can you share my webinar that is not related to our mission? We will pay you X amount. How do we respond to that, and how does that tie in with our not only our brand persona, but our goal? So our goal on social media is to be a go-to resource for nonprofits, so we have to become unbiased. So when people say, can you feature my product, I'll pay you, we have to respond no, but very in a nice way. And when people have negative mentions, we don't shy away from it, treat that as an opportunity to win back that supporter. So we actually respond, in our case, with a little bit of humor and be like, oh, I'm sorry that we suck. What can we do to make it better? Give us your tips. So again, these are some of the things that maybe you don't want to respond that way, but definitely map it out so then you don't get caught up in a situation where you respond one way, but your volunteer or staff responds a completely different way, and it's very contrasting on social media. And going back to what I mentioned earlier, even if you delete that message, it will appear somewhere else, whether it's on your followers feed or on Google's search engine as a cache copy. So make sure that you hit those points before it gets out of hand. The next is to set a schedule. So here the screen cap seems kind of scary because when I started, I set a schedule with my colleague every day on what are we posting, just so we know what messaging is out there, what time slot is it going out so we don't conflict, because the worst thing that could happen is I post from the TechSoup Canada account on Twitter at 12 p.m. She also posts at 12 p.m. So now we hit our followers twice in the same minute. So here, set a schedule. Even if you're doing it just yourself, it helps you, again, time your day, manage your workload much better. So some of the questions are, how often are you actually going to post? tweets, pin, etc. When are you actually going to do it? Are you going to do it during the weekday? Are you doing over the weekend? And what tool are you using to monitor your schedule? So for here in our screen cap, we're actually using a third-party tool that we now moved off of, but it's always good to have a tool that you can use at first, even if it doesn't work for you later on. You can always switch around. So we actually recently covered a few social media management tools in our Jane versus Tyranny product reviews. So some of the tools out there, if you heard of it, is Hootsuite or Buffer. We have other free tools that we kind of cover in that. So if you're interested in learning how these tools can help you, some of the features include automatically scheduling for like optimal posting time. So when you say I want to post on Monday, the tool will look at your followers and say majority of your followers are online at 3 p.m. So do you want to post at 3 p.m.? You say yes, and then that's done. You don't have to do any additional analysis, and you are reaching them at the right time. Another great aspect of these tools is if you are actually managing your social media account with other people, you can see what they have scheduled because you can share an organization account. So if you started scheduling things, let's say you schedule 5 tweets in one day, you can actually see whether your colleague has scheduled things on that day as well. So it also, similar to what we have in the screen cap, helps you understand what is going out from your organization and how you can work with each other. Actually not lastly, but another really important aspect of social media is you do need to measure and evaluate. You need to understand what is your return on investment, even if it's not hard numbers. A lot of people shy away from this because it's not like you can say, this tweet gave us $30. But there are other things that you can do to have metrics that will show whether your efforts are succeeding or not. So again, there are some free resources out there. In this example here, we are basing it off of this resource we found online, which is exposure, engagement, and conversion. These are 3 buckets of metrics that you can use to see whether you are successful or not. So in those buckets, there is the exposure, the C metric. These are things like how many people viewed your post, how many followers do you have, how many YouTube views, and how many clicks. So Bitly is another tool that you can use to just measure how many people clicked on that specific link. So this metric is very high level. It's more in terms of if you want, for example, if your goal is you want to reach people, seeing metrics are really good for that. The other metric is say and feel, which is in the engagement metrics. Say is when people just pass your information along. So let's say you posted something on Facebook and then I just shared it. As is with the exact message that you posted. Things like email forwards or repins on Pinterest or retweets. These are things where people took an extra step to share it. So still in the engagement metrics. Feel is when people actually personalize it a little bit more than just sharing. So for example, when you post a Facebook message and I share it, but instead of me just sharing your base message, I say, I love community living, they made such a difference in my life, please look at their latest event, and I share it. That is more personalized than that, say, just a straight share. So that is also a metric that you can use to boost your goal for engagement. The next one is conversion, so the do metrics, things like translating into physical dollars in your bank account, maybe advocacy actions like please sign this petition. The government's about to pass a law that is going to negatively affect our clients. Please help us make sure it doesn't happen. Or even signing up to be a volunteer or event attendance. There are metrics that you can use to track whether your followers came from social media. If you have more questions about that, let us know, and then we can follow up with you in more detail. But I'll give it out there right now. Google Analytics actually has great analytic tools, whether someone landed on your volunteer page from your Facebook or Twitter account. So going back into measurement and evaluation, there are other tools out there that will help you do all that math to take all the data and put into a way that you can visualize it. So for here, I have Sife, which is a free tool. I have our Text to Canada, Facebook, Twitter, SlideShare, and just for the fun of it, our Clout Score, all on one page so I can, throughout the day, just check whether all of our stats are on par. And again, these are things that I can use when I want to make a case for social media to either have more time invested to it or have more volunteers help me with it. These are great stats to have. So that's it for the presentation. I hope all of the information covered today has been useful for you. So now we're just going to jump briefly into the Q&A period. Yumi, my colleague, has been fielding a lot of questions throughout the webinar, so she will ask the questions on your behalf. If you have more questions, please feel free to just type into the question box and then she will ask it for you. So Yumi, do we have any questions from the audience?
So we actually only have one thus far. So the question was, give me a second, do you need consent from event participants if you're taking a picture from the back for your social media channels?
If you're taking a picture from the back and as long as it doesn't have any recognizable features, that's fine. If you're trying to take it from the front, you do need to have them sign a waiver. And that, again, it's not so much a hassle, but it goes into some privacy laws. So that's just something that you want to keep in mind. But that's a good question.
Does anyone else have any questions? It does not seem like it.
Okay, well, if you don't have any questions, I also just want to let you know that at the end of this webinar, we do have a survey that will launch. This is mainly to help us improve our future survey offerings, but also we have a last question that will ask you whether you want us to follow up with you directly if you have any questions that maybe you didn't want to be addressed in this webinar. So it's a very short survey question. It will pop up right after the webinar. There's only 3 questions. So on that note, I'm going to pass it back to Kim. Kim, is there any last-minute feedback you would like to have?
Can you let everyone know where they can find the presentation?
Yes, of course. Okay. Our presentation will be made available on our SlideShare account, but I will also send a copy to Neil and Kimberly, so you guys can also distribute it yourselves. We will also have a webinar recording uploaded to our YouTube channel, and all of our resources will be compiled on our website into the learning section under webinars.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
And certainly if anybody online had a question that didn't get answered, Neil's available as well here in our office. And you can feel free to call me as well if you can't get a hold of Neil. So I think unless there's any more questions, I think we're good.
Yeah, okay, so just one more follow-up question from Susan.
Sorry, I actually just got 2 questions just come in, so I think we have a minute, so we might as well just go through them quickly. So the first question was, if we don't already have a LinkedIn account, would you recommend setting one up?
So that's a very good question. This kind of goes in line with, what are your social media goals? If your goal is to raise awareness of your cause or at least just raise awareness of your organization, then yes, I would recommend creating at least a LinkedIn account and have your employees reference your organization in their own work history, and just have a note on LinkedIn on whether you are going to be active on that channel or not. So for example, we are on LinkedIn, but we are not active. We actually have a note saying that we're actively participating in a discussion forum. So if people want to reach out to us or have any questions about technology, that's the right forum to do. In the future, if we want to have a more robust LinkedIn strategy, we'll for sure go into high gear and do that. But for us, our goal is to just have a presence and have people find our organization. So we have done that. But if your goal is you want to be the go-to resource on the channels that you are on, then I would recommend not doing that. Mainly for the purpose, like if you're not active, it's very, very obvious that you're not active. So take it and reevaluate what is your goal for being there, and then decide accordingly. But good question.
So we have about 3 more questions. Do we want to answer all 3, or should we have one more? Because we're
maybe one more, so we don't tie into go over your lunch hour.
Okay, perfect. So the next question is, so Facebook page versus group, which one would you suggest?
So that's very good because that actually ties into with the Facebook algorithm. So kind of going back to the LinkedIn question, it depends on your goal. If you want to have great engagement, right now it seems like Facebook group is better for that because any post that you have to the Facebook group will for sure show up. But the only downside of that is anyone in your group can post to the group. And you won't be as visible as a brand because it is, again, groups are, think of it as like online clubs, so it's a little bit more personal. People don't associate large organization brands to be on Facebook groups. They're more of intimate discussion groups. Facebook page is great for having like your own timeline if you want to share photos and things and have it neatly packed into one, almost like a micro website. The only downside of that is the organic reach is declining for pages. So if your followers have, their aunts and uncles and their distant family posting a lot of pictures of their own personal accounts, that will actually get more ranking, more weight than a Facebook page, unless you pay for ads. But that's another another aspect of Facebook. But for us, like we don't pay for any ads on Facebook, and our organic reach is slow, but it's there. So that's just something that you need to keep in mind on whether you want to have a group or a page. Another tip about having a Facebook page is you just need to create more engaging content, have more things that are inspirational, things that will inspire people to share on their personal Facebook accounts. So I hope that answers the question.
So actually, I only have one more question, so maybe if you have a minute, maybe you can answer the last one as well.
Sure.
Yeah, so the last question is, we are a small market and quite isolated. We do use Facebook, but I'm not sure how much uptake there is on any other platforms. How can we find out?
So that is a very great question, and it depends on what you mean by you are a small market. Is it like if your organization is small and you don't have the right staff, time, and resources to manage all the channels, that's definitely an area to consider. Okay, you specified the Yukon. So that is something that you do want to consider when you look at different social media channels, whether Canadians or people in the Yukon are very active in that state. There's actually a lot of great social media benchmark reports. Be sure to search for consumer benchmark reports because a lot of reports won't be geared towards nonprofits, but they do have really great stats that still apply. Things like unique monthly visitors, how many people are on that platform from X country. So in that sense, I would, for you specifically, I would recommend Facebook because majority of Canadians are on Facebook. But if you're interested in another social media channel but you're not sure if it's worth your time, just do a quick research on social media benchmarks. Search for things like statistics, monthly visitors, and just type in, you might want to type in things like business, so it gives you the proper reports. And generally you can pull a few stats just with that social media channel to help you make a better decision. So I hope that answers your question. All right, so I know there's a few people who might not have put in your questions, but if you have any last-minute thoughts, please feel free to fill out that survey so that we can make sure that we follow up with you properly. But I do want to take this time to thank Kimberly and Neil for having us. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. So on that note, I will again make the presentation available and the recording will be online, and we will keep in touch. So thank you again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Okay. Bye. Bye.